Okay, I'm going to make a video of getting this snowblower going. The carburetor's got to come off, so I'm going to pull this guard off and get the carburetor off. And it's about 90 degrees out, so I do have one of my bigger fans on, so you may hear it in the background. It's called a King of Fans. Thing really moves here, but it stays cool in the garage if I keep it closed. It doesn't get much above 76 in here. If I keep the garage closed, it's I think about 87 or 88 out right now. 75 in here, so yeah, I just leave the door down. Got the cover off. That's really sticky. That's kind of sticky, so we'll get this thing apart. The primer hose is broken off. I unplugged the kill switch. I'll put new fuel hose, new primer hose on it, and clean up and rebuild the carburetor. So 2 bolts hold the carburetor on, and this cover has a screw here, which would be right up the top there. A screw here, which would be over here, and the 2 screws that went through there that were right there. And that cover heater box is what that is, so the carburetor gets warm air from the heat of the muffler, doesn't frost up that way. Now this one's nasty. I had to turn on my ventilator. This smells nasty, but get a load of this. The float doesn't even move. That's stuck right in there, and that's got like a goo on it, and yeah, and this smells pretty hideous. This is all plugged up. This thing probably hasn't been running a minimum of a decade. Looks like it's been a long time. So anyway, get stuff soaking in lacquer thinner, maybe soak it overnight. I couldn't even get the float pin out, so anyway, it's in lacquer thinner. So in the meantime, while that soaks overnight, I'll get the fuel tank cleaned out. It's a plastic tank, so that'll be no big deal. And I'll get new fuel lines and new fuel shut off and new primer hose, and it has spark because it runs on gum out. And I'm also draining the oil out so I can put fresh oil on. Man, look, just would you look at this hideous fuel line. That was where it went through the blower housing on the engine, but it's all pretty darn bad. And this is the valve, the inline valve. I'm just going to put a new one on. Don't want any fuel system problems in the tank. I'll dump the nastiness out and clean it out with a little lacquer thinner, because it's plastic. It's not going to have any rust in it. And that's only held on with 2 bolts. You take these 2 plastic bolts out of the top of the tank, and the tank just lifts up and off. Out of this bracket right here, it just kind of tilts out and lifts up and off. Took off the blower housing so I could reroute fuel hoses and replace the primer hose. So you got to take out those 3 head bolts, loosen those 2, and a bolt down there and on the other side for the blower housing. And I just took the governor control off because the wires were attached to the magneto on that thing, and I didn't want to cut the wires. So anyway, we got some numbers here now. Okay, it looks like H70-1300266L, serial numbers 7254D. Well, I got the fuel hose, primer hose all routed. I gave this a clean up and a quickie paint, so our engine looks a little better. I'll paint the heater box and whatnot before I put it back on. Still gotta do the carb. Got the carb seals and the carb gasket. Also put a new tanks all clean, and put a new fuel shut off on it too. Carburetor cleaned up really nice. Throttle freed up. Got the choke out. I'll put that back in, and This was corroded in, so I had to fuss to get that out. But somebody had turned this in. I suspect the people at the estate sale tried to get this thing started, and they bottomed it out, so I had to clean that up. This is all cleaned out. Had a new spark plug, and this was turned all the way in, like they didn't know what they were doing, and they're trying to get the engine going. But anyway, it's all cleaned up, and I'm going to reassemble it now. Got the carburetor back on, the fuel line, primer, everything hooked up. I think I'll crank it up. The governor's hooked up, and I think I'll crank it up with the heater box off so I can adjust the carburetor. But I want to check the grease on this and then make sure all that stuff runs. You know, I don't even know if the belts are any good in here, but we'll get it cranked up here shortly. Okay, this is take two. Take one, I pushed the wrong button and just got a still picture of it sitting here, and I started it up and adjusted the carburetor. The thing runs really nice. So anyway, I'm gonna fire it up again and show you how it runs. The carburetor's already adjusted. Really didn't need a lot, but give it the throttle. It feels cold. I'll give it a choke. I'll hit the primer once. We'll see what it does. Drive works. It runs good, the drive works, the auger works. The shifter I can't move, so I'm going to take the bottom pan off and see what needs to be lubed up under there. I just wanted to talk about the fuel system on this thing for a minute here. This thing had one of the nastiest carburetors I had done. It was just this nasty goo in there. And what I think happened, this being a snowblower, probably had some water in its gas, and it probably had gas with alcohol. And the water would have settled in the bottom of the fuel line because it's the lowest part of the fuel system. And of course the alcohol would have been absorbed into the water, and I think it rotted the fuel line, and as the fuel evaporated out of the carburetor, that stuff flowed into here and just made that nasty goo that was in there. And when I took the fuel line out, and I don't know, I think I had it on video, I was pulling this hose out and it was just stretching out really thin. It was this nasty, sticky, gooey mess. So I suspect that was alcohol that had caused the demise of that hose that plugged up that carburetor so bad. The fuel tank wasn't bad at all, so that's what makes me think that, you know, any water that might have been in it went in that hose and the alcohol was absorbed into it. Got the bearing, finally came, so I'm going to start working on the snowblower here. I'm going to take these two nuts off, take this off, assembly has to come off, and then the chute will just come off. On some snowblowers are attached with anchors down here, and you really don't need to take the chute off to separate, but seeing I got to take this off, I'm going to, and I'm going to take the belt guard off. Then these two bolts hold the, and there's two on the other side, hold the blower assembly to the drive unit. So what I do is I try and get the belt off around that and off the crankshaft, because then you can get the blower out. You can see those shafts. That's the drive. The drive is driven off the camshaft. Power drive. This is the impeller. The bearing that's bad is right there. Hear it? So you can hear the roughness and feel it too. So we'll get that bearing changed out and get it back together. Change the bearing, you gotta pull this hub, and then there's three little bolts, and just drive it off the shaft. And the bottom bolts you don't need to take completely out because they're in like a tilted hole. You just need to take the top ones all the way out. That's the brake that stops the blower when you release the handle. So just make sure your brake shoe's good. This is the time to replace it. Check your idler pulley, make sure it's good. And that'll make it a lot easier to clean that and paint it up with it off. I always take the set screw. There's a set screw that goes in right there. It holds the pulley to the shaft. I always take them completely out. I can put a couple drops of oil in there. And that makes it a little easier to get that pulley off. I could take these nuts off and use a puller if I have to. You know, take the pulley off the hub and use a puller if I need to. But a lot of times they come off. This one had 2 Allen screws in it, so I couldn't lift the pulley off, so I just took the pulley off this, and then I saw the other screw, and as soon as I took that out, I was able to lift that right off. So these usually don't seize on. So you take these 3 bolts out, this cap off, take these out on each side and that, and take this assembly out, and then the impeller, gearbox, everything will just drop out of the bucket. Alright, so it's a part. I had to heat a couple of those. I broke 2 off. No big deal, I'll just hammer them out. They're like a little spline screw. So I'll just put some new ones, 1/4-20s in there, and just the screw, not a bolt, and just tack weld them to the bucket. And these are the little bushing that rides on the end of the auger here. So I'll clean these up and re-grease them. And there's the bad bearing right there. So I'll get that off and get the new one on. Sometimes I just burn those off the torch, but first I'll see if I can pop it off. I don't think I can might be able to get the press in under there and just press it off, but with this on here, I don't know. That's not going to move on that. It's too rusty. So I'll just see if I can pop it off, and like I say, if I can, I'll just cut it off the torch. Alright, I didn't feel like horsing with it, so I just got the torch out, and then I just heat the race against the shaft almost straight down so I don't get the shaft hot, and then I just blow out 2 or 3 spots, and then the bearing falls right off. So, took the pressure washer and cleaned everything up. Cleaned all the grease off the engine. I'll paint the engine up nice. I'll scrape the remaining peeled paint that the pressure washer didn't get. The paint strips right off the pressure washer, but I didn't blast a lot of that really hard, so may have to scrape a little on this, but this cleaned up pretty good. Finally back to work on the snowblower after a couple weeks. I got the scraper bar off, and the feet, these feet were down to here. So the scraper bar has 0 wear on it. So I'll throw that in the blast cabinet and those and all the bolts and hardware and clean them up. This I'm just going to wire wheel and paint. I'm not doing a concourse restoration on a snowblower, mind you. I'm going to make it look nice and a usable machine. And I got the impeller and the auger painted. Those screws are what holds the bearings on this end of the shaft here. I still got to put the bearing on there. I haven't put it on because I've been painting things. This is the paint I used on the impeller and fan and the blower. And this is the paint I'm going to use on the bucket. I'm just using a fairly fine wire wheel, and it's cleaning it out pretty good. So that'll be good enough. Good enough. I used that to feather the paint out. This is like a powder coating almost, and it's kind of thick, and it just peels where it was rusted underneath it. But I think we'll just give this a light sanding and call it good. Cleaned up pretty good for what it is. First coat of paint on the outside of the bucket. I'll let it dry overnight. Well, there's 2 coats of paint on the bucket, inside and out, and that's the most I'm going to do to it. It's going to be good enough. One thing I noticed was interesting on this bucket, there's 11 different stampings on this bucket, you know. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stampings that I counted. And if you count these, that's 12. Because there's 4 of them, but they would all have been the same. So just in some simple manufacture of the bucket, there's quite a bit of stampings there. And I took the chute apart to sandblast it, and this, I don't know if that shows up as cracked, so I'll give that a little weld after I sandblast it, and then we'll paint all that stuff up. I'm not going to take this apart. I'll just clean this up. I'm not going to bother. Well, I might sandblast. I just don't want to get grit up in here, but it's glass beads, so probably be okay. I'll just hit that metal bracket and this metal bracket. So I welded that one that was broken up, and this one was cracked around it, so I just run a bead of weld around that. So I think the chute's close enough to being ready for paint. Alright, I got the shifter freed up. Basically, it was just a lot of grease on that shaft, so the grease just got thick, so I oiled it, and I'll wipe it off and re-oil it. So that would be neutral, that would be forward fast, that would be reverse. Just off the center, neutral is reverse. So we'll finish lubing things up and cleaning things up, and we can call it good. This is the rubber disc that runs the wheels when this turns. That's turned by the camshaft on the engine, and when you engage the drive, it pushes this up tight against that there. So I don't know if the little mechanism shows up there or not, but a little mechanism under there that pushes that disc up. Much like some of the smaller snapper riding lawnmowers and stuff use the same type of apparatus to drive them. We'll adjust it all up once it's all together and running. Well, the snowblower bucket is back together. Got the new bearing installed, so when the spins now it's quiet. Before it just roared when that was spinning. So yeah, it's all bearings right in there. The bucket's installed. Looks pretty good. Snowblower is pretty much all completely together, working condition. I just gotta pull the wheels and paint them, and that'll be maybe later in the week. Well, I have the snowblower finished finally. I think I'm going to take this up north, so I don't think I'm going to sell it, use it at the cottage. We have a tractor with a snowblower, but a little walk behind unit would be nice. This is a ST724. It's a 7-horse, 24-inch. Now, it hasn't been started since I got it running, which was a day or two after I picked it up, so it's been a couple months. I got probably about maybe 6-8 hours of work into this. I'd just work on a little here, and like one day I'd take 15-20 minutes to throw a coat of paint on the bucket when it was all disassembled, and next day put another coat on, you know, things like that. It doesn't take but 10 minutes to separate the unit. Doesn't take very long to get the impeller out. It's not very time consuming. So anyway, let's see if it starts after sitting for a long time. Got the shifter freed up. That all works. When you pull this handle, the drive goes. the auger's engaged, it's not all rumbly and noisy. I can't see what it's videoing. You can see it runs quite good. Pretty happy with it. I don't have as much into the snowblower as I did the lawnmower. Probably got maybe 10 bucks into it on top of what I paid for it. So for less than $50, that's including the oil change. And a pretty decent snowblower. So I'm going to run the gas out of this and so it can sit until it's needed. I might add electric start to it for my dad. Starter motor bolts here, switch bolts here. So there we go. Pretty nice snowblower. Not too much use for it on a 90-degree day in July, but at least it's done. So again, if you enjoy my videos, please subscribe and thank you for watching.